Hi everybody, Brittany. I am back with another book review. This week I am talking about The Berlin Letters by Katherine Reay. This book was interesting. I feel like the Berlin Wall and all of that sort of time period in history, if you were someone who grew up during that time period, you probably have a pretty good understanding of what was going on. I was born in the 90s, post-Berlin Wall, so I didn't really realize how much I didn't know about that time period. I knew about what the Berlin Wall was. I knew that it split kind of the free versus the Soviet side of things, and that it kind of went up abruptly. My mom always said it was kind of the equivalent of, I grew up in New Jersey, it's sort of the equivalent of somebody going to work in Philly one day and then just not being able to come home and being separated for decades, which now that I've read this book, it's a similar kind of idea. But anyway, so this was interesting because I got to learn a lot about the time period, about what was going on politically during that time period, and also how much larger and bigger that stretch was. I thought it was only a small period of time that things were kind of split up and messy in Berlin. No, it was decades and decades and decades. So that was interesting. Again, other people probably know those things. For me, it was new territory. This book was very good. One of the things that I loved the most about this book was the candidness and the straightforwardness of sort of the main character, but also the characters kind of around her. So this book is written by the point of view of a woman. She is in the 80s. She's either like in her 20s or 30s. She works for the CIA sort of tangentially. Her parents and her grandparents were from Germany, specifically Berlin, Germany, and they came over after the separation of the Berlin Wall and all of that. So her parents were on the Soviet side, but her grandparents were on the American side of things. And actually the day the wall goes up, she ends up getting thrown over the wall by her mother so that she can go live a free life. And then eventually the grandparents immigrate to America and so on and so forth. So she is German, she has dual citizenship, but she doesn't really know any of the specifics about what happened to her parents. In fact, she thinks that both of her parents are dead and that they died in a car crash. The other point of view of this book is letters or sort of journal entries, not exactly the exact letters that the father sends, but more so kind of his musing and his thought process throughout kind of the 50s all the way through to the 80s. So the father, plot twist, is not dead. You kind of learn that relatively early on, even though she's told that her dad and her mom are both dead. Her dad is alive, and in fact her dad is sending letters to her grandfather in America. He started sending them when they were still in Germany, but he continued to send them all the way through till the 80s, and then eventually the grandfather passes away. She finds the letters, and interestingly enough, all the letters are written in code because he's telling the grandfather things that they're not supposed to know about outside of the wall, things that are going on politically and socially and all of those things, because he's a reporter, so he's kind of got this inside scoop going on where he knows things and he's writing letters to the grandfather, but they have to be decrypted or encrypted and then decoded on the other end. As she's growing up, her grandfather teaches her how to do this through like fun games and birthdays and things like that, and she's kind of learning this skill, not knowing the purpose behind it. But it turns out that her grandfather was actually a spy for the Americans, and that's kind of why they moved and so on and so forth. The book was very good. But like I said, one of the things I loved the most was the candid and the straightforwardness. There are so many times where I'm reading a book and I want the character to just ask the question they're thinking, to just have the uncomfortable conversation, to just talk to your grandmother and say, hey, what happened before we left Berlin? Or what happened before we left Germany? Or go to your aunt and ask these questions. There are so many times in books where the main character's like, I just can't do that. I can't ask the questions. I'll never know. And then they have to find out in some sort of convoluted tangential sort of way. This character will go to her aunt's house, knock on the front door and say, I need to know what happened. Are my parents alive? I found these letters and this is what's going on, blah, blah, blah. So I loved that because sometimes it is so grating and so annoying when a main character just doesn't want to do the sort of straightforward or easy route, quote unquote. But this one, it was very much that. It was, okay, well, I'm just going to do this, and okay, I'm just going to do that. I'm going to be open and honest with people about the information that I have so that I can get open and honest information from them. Anyway, I thought it was very good. If you are a history buff, if you're someone who's interested in the 80s, if you're into kind of spy stuff and sort of mysteries to a degree, this would be a good book. It was something outside of my normal comfort zone, but that being said, I really enjoyed it. My next book is going to be this one. It is Trust. It is by Hernan Diaz. I heard that this is one of Barack Obama's favorite books. I am about, I don't know, maybe a third of the way through it. It's very good. Early impressions, it's reminding me a lot of F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it's reminding me a lot specifically of The Beautiful and the Damned, specifically the first section. It's about a young couple and this man who's in finance, and it's during that time period kind of leading up to the Great Depression and then the years after it. So it really, really is reminding me of those characters and that setting and that sort of portion of society. But just the way that this author seems to write is very similar to F. Scott Fitzgerald as well. Maybe not in his ability to be descriptive, but definitely in his use of language and his vocabulary and things like that. Another good comparison would probably be Immortals, except for minus all the tangents. Immortals is the king of the tangents, and the first time I was reading him, I think it was Gentleman in Moscow, I would get very hung up on the tangents and would almost get frustrated with him, thinking, why is this important? Why does this matter? But it always does. So if you enjoy either F. Scott Fitzgerald or Immortals, you'd probably like this. Again, I'm still kind of digging through it, but so far I really like it. Let me know if you have read either The Berlin Letters or Trust, and let me know your thoughts and opinions on it, and I will be back next week.